Hi, I'm Russ. Today I want to discuss a little bit more about fire-generated patterns. We already had a discussion in one of the earlier modules about ventilation patterns, but this goes a little bit more into forensics. Basically what this series of videos does is it goes through section 6.3 and 6.4 and identifies specific forensic tools that are identified in those sections of NFPA 921, the 2024 version of that document. And the intent for these videos is simply to help give jurists and defendants more understanding when they're dealing with prosecution, both civil and criminal related issues. So we're going to talk today about full room involvement generated patterns. So what you have in flashover is you transition from basically a fuel limited fire to a ventilation limited fire. There's just not enough oxygen to sustain combustion. It's called a flashover. And that's basically when the whole room erupts in fire. And what a telltale sign of that is radiant heat flux resulting in damage on the floor. That includes even charring of the underside of furniture because of the intense heat. Major damage occurs in a very short time. The telltale thumb rules for flashover that you have an upper layer temperature of roughly 600 degrees Celsius, and that provides about 20 kilowatts per meter squared at the floor. Now, the reason flashover happens is because you have reflection. So if you have a fire in the middle of a room, that fire is pushing its radiative heat flux on the adjacent sides of that built room, the ceiling, the walls. And what happens is a portion of that energy is reflected back. And that added reflection increases the overall heat flux that combustibles feel. And that enables much faster combustion. So some post-flashover conditions, you can assume broken windows. You're always going to have broken windows if you're above 500 degrees Celsius. Flames outside of windows. The whole principle of ventilation limited means that the hot products of combustion, the pyrolates, they're seeking oxygen so they can combust. And you don't have flames on the interior necessarily, but as soon as a ventilation opening is provided, what will happen is those hot gases will fly out and mix with the oxygen and ignite because it's hot enough for auto ignition. So a telltale sign of flashover conditions are flames emerging from buildings, from doors, from windows. The other telltale signs, widespread damage. I wanted to talk about one issue here while we're on this page, and that has to do with this bottom image, this image of these broken windows. I heard of a story once. A friend had was called in after the fact to analyze a fire, and it occurred in a summer camp, and it occurred in the wintertime. So they were going back and doing the forensics, and one of the fire protection engineers called upon to do this analysis strictly based on photographs. He concluded that there was some kind of an explosion involved, so likely an arson-related event. And his conclusion was based upon the fact that there was no remnants of glass at the base of the window, so it had blasted a considerable distance away. Likewise, there was a parking gate that was knocked over, shown in these photographs. So he concluded and was about ready to testify in court that this was most likely an explosion-related event. We'll come to find out, after talking more with the owners and with the fire department knocked down that road barricade when they came in, and the owners claim that this is a summer camp, that it's not a heated nor a permanently occupied facility. Consequently, there was no glass in those windows. So it really drives home the importance of understanding the facts around a case through testimony witness prior to arriving at a conclusion. So this is a famous test, and the point I wanted to bring up here is that you're going to have very distinctive soot layers pre-flashover. So while it's still a material limited or a combustible fuel limited fire, so you'll have clearly demarcated patterns. And if somebody was looking at this, they might conclude that the fire origin was at the base of this image. And that simply was not the case. This is a ventilation pattern because the door was open. The fire actually was started at the bottom right or bottom left outside of this image. So the takeaway here, the important thing to understand, is that pre-flashover patterns will remain distinguishable unless additional ventilation is provided. So if you can catch a fire prior to flashover, or if it's in an area after flashover where there's limited oxygen, then you're likely going to see patterns. But if there are ventilation-related events, such as broken windows or open doors, it's going to mask those patterns. And it's important to understand that. Flashover is going to result in significant damage. As stated before, you're actually going to see damage all over, in this case, this wood cabinet, top, bottom, sides, even underneath. This is an FDS rendering, and I think what's interesting is it shows this same fire that those images were taken from, shows the heat flux as a function of color. And you can see the red is 150 kilowatts per square meter or more. But what's interesting here is at the door, against the wall, as well as at the base of the door and on the side of this far wall, that's where the maximum heat flux is due to the ventilation coming through the door. If you take a look at this image was taken from some images from a fire that occurred in a garage. And what's interesting, if you just look at this image, you could never come to a conclusion of where the fire occurred. But if you look at a few telltale signs around that garage, this is the passenger side, the right side of this truck, and what you see is the front tire it's not nearly as damaged as this back tire. You can also tell from the ventilation patterns, or excuse me, the coloration patterns. You have more intense heat on the back side than the front. Same thing with the hood, same thing from the driver's side. This is clearly more intense heat flux at this location than other locations. And when you come out and look at this structure from the outside, what you'll notice is it seems like flames were pouring over this area. This seems to be where the damage happened. Now, initially, you might conclude that, well, the fire was right here just because of that, and that's actually not the case. Further forensic investigation, witness testimony will indicate that the owner opened the garage door because he thought something was going on and noticed this fire was here. So this damage here was due to the funneling of these flames because of that particular open door. If you look on the inside, what you can see is that there are deeper char-related issues here, that you had significant loss or charring at the top, and it poked a hole through up there. So there were multiple events here, but still, examining this, it's really hard to detect where did that fire happen. Another part of this analysis, if you look at this 2x4 here and analyze the char here compared to other locations, the char actually ran the whole way down, and on the back side of this particular 2x4, you had much less charring than the front side. Similarly, back here, the char patterns down low, you had much less char down low than you did up high, but once again, down low, you did have char here. Now, coupling two things, this charring effect here and the coloration and tire damage, complete destruction here, it would lead someone to think that there was something, a greater heat flux in this vicinity. And you can understand just how hard it is to try to put things together after flashover conditions. But further investigation at this location, what it found was this bicycle with a series of lithium oxide batteries. And upon further witness investigation, it was determined that this bike was thrown into a body of water, and it sat there for a considerable time before the child lost his bike in basically some water. The father went and pulled it out, but it took quite a while for him to get over there and do that. It was brought into this location, and it resulted in this fire. So it just demonstrates the lithium dichotomy. And with that, here's an interesting point. The Department of Energy complex, I think recently there was an article quoting Nick Bartlett, and he's one of my associates at National Renewable Energy Lab in Golden, Colorado. So he is the fire-related AHJ authority having jurisdiction, and that's my role too at another Department of Energy site. So we're kind of we collaborate occasionally. But NREL's National Renewable Energy Labs, NREL's position through Nick Bartlett was to actually prohibit any personal electric vehicles, such as bicycles and scooters. And it's kind of ironic. The reason I bring that is we're really pushing for carbon neutral or carbon negative, or at least minimal carbon approaches to transportation. And you'd expect NREL of all Department of Energy laboratories in the country to be a little bit more progressive in their stance for permitting those type of devices. But they have a flat-out ban, and this is the reason why. It's because it's very difficult. Now, it's a very small risk, but it's a very difficult risk to predict in terms of can these vehicles, can these charged batteries, the batteries during charging process, can they ignite? We don't have the information quantified yet. And because of that, it's very hard to transition to full electric vehicles. So it does have some challenges. Anyway, back on this situation. So this bike was identified between the tire previously shown and the stud previously shown. It had some telltale damage. When the batteries were inspected, you could actually tell that there was some damage within the batteries. So it seems clear after the investigation that included both the analysis of the structure, that included the, analyzing things after flashover, narrowing down where the deeper char was and the burn patterns, and through witness testimony, the conclusion was that this bicycle was likely the cause. Unfortunately, because of the uncertainties here, there's never a foolproof 100% conclusion, but it seems reasonable in this case, just based on history, that this was the source of the fire. So that really demonstrates the process that's used with fire patterns in trying to identify where the fire origins are. It's not an easy task, but you have to combine multiple tools and witness testimony concerning the configuration of the environment prior to fire to arrive at a conclusion. Here's some interesting references. I wanted to point out the Steve Karpman reference. This was an interesting document, and it just demonstrates the imprecise nature of fire investigation. So Steve Karpman, I think he had a 25-year career with fire investigation through the ATF. He went on to do some private consulting. I still think he and his son are doing private consulting in Auburn, California, but what he did, and what's recorded in this particular document, was the results from various fire investigators coming in and basically try to uncover origins, given various, pictures, even, in some cases, even walking down test fires. But the conclusion was impossible to derive. Only 10% of the individuals participating in this analysis, and keep in mind, the individuals participating in his forensic class, or the ATF's forensic class, only 10% identified the origin correctly. So it just tells you how challenging this is, and really to question the results from fire investigators in court, unless there's some really solid data that they can back up their conclusions, it's probably dangerous to conclude, with 100% accuracy that what they're saying is accurate, unless there's some good fire forensics from engineers or scientists on that. Hey, thank you for your time. If you have any more questions, put them in the comments and I'll respond to them. Have a good day.